But Sunday, the 2nd of September, 1984, was a Father's Day like no other.
You got to remember, I was marked to die.
In the tranquil suburbs of southwestern Sydney, an event occurred that for many forever transformed Father's Day. This day, intended to honor fatherhood and celebrated by most Australians, devolved into a frightening confrontation between two infamous biker gangs, the Bandidos MC and the Comancheros MC, resulting in disaster and death. In today's bite-sized true crime recap, we revisit the Milperra Massacre, also known as the Father's Day Massacre, that took place in the Viking Tavern car park during a motorcycle trade meet. Stay until the very end to discover the aftermath of this terrible event that shocked a nation, left a dark stain on Father's Day, terrified a community, and contributed to Australia's tough gun laws. Sunday, September 2nd, 1984, saw the people of Sydney, Australia celebrating Father's Day with their families. Little did anyone know, however, that this day would go down in the history books as the date of one of the deadliest biker gang massacres ever, when two rival motorcycle clubs, the Bandidos and the Comanchero, clashed in the quiet southwestern suburb of Milperra. So, who were these two groups? The Comancheros Motorcycle Club were established in 1968 by Scottish immigrant William George Jock Ross, who held the title of Supreme Commander and ran the gang in an extremely authoritarian manner. They had a reputation for being violent, frequently participating in brawls, and Ross even had his members partake in military-style drills. The Bandidos Motorcycle Club, on the other hand, was founded in 1966 in Texas by Donald Eugene Chambers, and grew swiftly in the following years, gaining many Vietnam War veterans as members. There was long-standing rivalry between these two gangs over the fact that several Comancheros left to join Australia's first Bandidos chapter. The bad blood festered for many years, finally flaring up on that fateful Father's Day when the simmering resentment escalated into a firefight, resulting in a devastating loss of life. There were various reasons thought to have contributed to the fight between the Bandidos and the Comanchero, such as rivalry over turf and narcotics, as both clubs had anti-drug policies. However, Colin Caesar Campbell, who served as sergeant-at-arms in both Comanchero chapters and later in the Bandidos, saw antagonism as the primary cause of the violence, all stemming from that original breakaway and formation of the Bandidos. In late 1983, one of Campbell's brothers and another Comanchero member discovered the club's president and founder, William George Jock Ross, in an inappropriate relationship with one of the members' wives. Campbell, as sergeant-at-arms, ordered that Ross face charges for violating one of the club's regulations, which might have resulted in his expulsion. However, Ross did not show up to the meetings to resolve the problem. Instead, he announced the club's separation into two chapters, those who supported him and those who wanted to charge him. Ross and the remaining Comancheros then left to found a new clubhouse in Harris Park. About 10 were left behind, and they eventually formed the Bandidos Club, under the leadership of Anthony Snodgrass Spencer, or Snoddy, who had reached out to the national president of the Bandidos in the United States, having been impressed by them when he visited the States 2 years prior, to gain permission to launch Australia's first chapter. Finally, as a symbolic gesture, the new Bandidos members burnt their Comanchero colors. There was no turning back. The hostility between the two clubs persisted, and in August 1984, Campbell claimed that Spencer and Ross had declared war during a phone call, aggravating the already extreme friction between the Bandidos and Comanchero. This hatred came to an explosive conclusion with the Milperra Massacre. The Father's Day began innocently enough, with a British motorcycle club swap meet advertisement appearing in local press releases. The Viking Tavern was chosen as the location for the event, which was due to begin at 10 a.m. on that Sunday. Unbeknownst to the organizers, however, the Comancheros were preparing for a fight, and at around 1 p.m., 19 armed Comancheros entered the tavern's parking lot and strategically positioned themselves in hiding, armed and ready to fight. Jack Ross, the Comancheros leader and a military tactician, planned to trap the Bandidos in a pincer maneuver, quite similar to the bullhorn ambush that was employed during the Anglo-Zulu War. His plan was to stand alone in the open and draw the Bandidos in. Eventually, though, as time dragged on, his gang members entered the tavern's bar, figuring their opponents were not going to attend the swap meet. Hence, when 34 armed Bandidos did show up, the Comancheros were caught by surprise. As the warring gangs faced each other, chaos followed. At first, there was only verbal conflict, as both parties exhibited non-lethal weapons and challenged each other to settle the argument without resorting to firearms. Tragically, however, a shotgun fired into the air, sparking a full-fledged brawl involving fists, guns, and other weapons. With occasional shooting and vicious beatings, the scenario devolved into a violent and deadly battle. Gregory Shadow Campbell, a Bandido member, and Vice President Mario Chopper Chianter were among the first casualties, both killed during the confrontation. Jacques Ross, the Comancheros' leader, was also injured but fought on with a machete and a pick handle. He was hit several times and eventually fell. As the battle continued, police received reports of a person going insane with a rifle at the Viking Tavern, where shots were fired. More than 200 police officers rushed to the location to respond to the incident, cordoning off the area. The brawl lasted at least 10 minutes, during which time police helicopters flew overhead and numerous terrified members of the public sought cover in the tavern, which bizarrely had kept serving drinks while the fight continued outside. The fallout from the fight was terrible. 4 Comancheros and 2 Bandidos were killed, as was a 14-year-old bystander, Leanne Walters, who was hit by a stray gunshot. Many more were injured, with 20 of them requiring hospitalization. Colin Caesar Campbell, the Bandido Sergeant-at-Arms, amazingly survived after being wounded 6 times, but his road to recovery was quite long and difficult. The Milperra Massacre court case was one of the largest in Australian history. A total of 43 people were initially accused of 7 counts of murder, but 10 of them had their charges dismissed before the trial. The Bandido secretary, Bernard Bernie Pogorski, was granted pardon after collaborating with authorities as a witness. The trial lasted more than 2 years, making it New South Wales's longest combined criminal trial. 58 police officers, including armed members of the Tactical Operations Unit, were present in the courtroom during the trial. To protect their safety, witnesses needed armed guards from the Witness Security Unit. Jury selection was a difficult process because each accused person had the authority to reject 20 jurors without offering a reason. Approximately 1,500 jurors were summoned, and only 12 were considered suitable to sit on the case. Finally, on June 12, 1987, the jury returned its verdict. The jury delivered 63 murder convictions, 147 manslaughter convictions, and 31 of affray. The supreme commander of the Comancheros, William Jacques Ross, was named as the man who instigated this act of violence in the first place. He was sentenced to life in prison for his role in the massacre. 4 more Comancheros were condemned to life in prison for murder, while 16 Bandidos were convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 7 years in prison. The outcomes of this horrific occurrence triggered reforms to New South Wales's gun legislation. The Comancheros were known for openly riding motorcycles while carrying registered shotguns. As a result, the state revised its Firearms and Dangerous Weapons Act, requiring registered firearm owners to prove a valid reason for carrying firearms in public. Following the trial, 3 Comancheros were successful in appealing their murder verdicts, which were reduced to manslaughter counts. Ross was the last inmate to be released in 1992 after serving 5 years and 3 months. The Milperra Massacre had a long-lasting impact on Australia's criminal justice system and weapons legislation, acting as a heartbreaking reminder of the devastation that gang violence can cause. Innocent lives were taken, families were broken up, and a community was traumatized. The violence that occurred on Father's Day in 1984 permanently tainted Australia's perception of motorcycle club culture. The Milperra Massacre, as it became known, had a long-lasting impact on the community, serving as a dismal reminder of the violence and risk associated with outlaw motorcycle organizations. It is still remembered as one of the most infamous motorbike conflicts in Australian history.